Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial we are going to be making a Crackle Floral and Leopard tumbler inspired by the amazing Glamour Tribe Customs. Suzanna is amazing. And I never would have thought to layer flowers over leopard because I'm not a huge leopard fan. But her tumbler was so gorgeous, I thought it would be nice to add a crackle background just since we're in the fall season. So without further ado, let's get started. You are going to need a heat gun if you want to speed up the process, and a crackle medium from falltumbler. I purchased this on Amazon because it was hard to find in the store. But you want to apply a generous amount of this. I have found after doing quite a few of these tumblers in the past, the thicker you put your crackle medium on, the thicker your lines are going to be in your crackle. If you put a very thin layer on, they are going to be a little more discreet. So if you chose not to do the leopard spots over the crackle, you could actually use water slide instead of the printable vinyl that we are using in this tutorial, and it would show up very well. Now you don't want to be too sloppy with this. You do kind of want to stay in straight lines, be a little bit more uniform, because that is going to reflect whenever you apply your paint onto the top layer. You can actually see the streaks that you have applied on here. So choose a way. Usually I do mine vertically, and then I'm going to take my heat gun and just dry this very quickly so I can move on to the next step. You don't have to dry it. You can set it to the side and allow it to dry for about 30 to 45 minutes, and I would say it would be ready for the acrylic paint. Now I did choose a different color acrylic than what I have in the picture here. I ended up using a vanilla colored acrylic because I wanted a little bit of a warmer tone instead of just bright white. And it is Craft Smart Vanilla Acrylic. I'm not even sure where it come from. I've had it for so long. But I'm sure that you could find a creamier or warmer toned white. So to apply the acrylic after you have dried your crackle medium, you do not want to go over the same spot multiple times. You can see I have about 2 strokes in each area. Your coverage does not have to be perfect because it is going to crackle, and this is going to add your dimension. If you go over a spot that has already begun to crackle, it is going to basically just pull up in one spot and it will not look cute at all. So you do need to move very quickly. Make sure you have plenty of paint on your brush before you go into that stroke. And be sure to very lightly smooth out your bottom rim so there is not any lumps or bumps around that you're going to have to sand down after your first couple of layers of epoxy. So I'm going to go back over and speed this up with my heat gun. Again, you don't have to do this, but I do find that I get a better effect if we can speed it up a little bit. And then we can move straight into our next step. Now, before I applied my glitters, I did go over with Rust-Oleum matte clear coat, just so there is a matte finish on the surface beneath, and none of my glitter is going to actually stick to my crackle. And here I have burnt umber and champagne from PDB glitters, and I'm going to mix those two just to get a little bit of a lighter color for the center of my leopard spots. And then I will grab a burnt amber acrylic. Now usually I would mix in Mod Podge with this, but I did realize that I was out, so I did have to go over these a couple of times. Definitely mix in a little bit of Mod Podge to make this a little more tacky, so your glitter is going to stick in these spots a little bit better. But you just take a brush and brush on your acrylic and then go over with your glitter mixture. this is just personal preference, but I also put spots on the bottom of my cup so the design will flow all the way around. And typically anytime that I use acrylic and Mod Podge, or Mod Podge in general, I allow that to sit overnight because it's better to be safe than sorry, and I would rather wait a little bit of extra time than apply my epoxy. And the Mod Podge, if not dried completely, will actually leave a white residue underneath the surface. So we definitely don't want that. Allow this to dry and then go over with Rust-Oleum matte clear coat a couple of times just to seal in those glitters. And this is a True 22 from the Steel Magnolias, and I'm applying approximately 20 to 25 milliliters of a little extra ink epoxy. And if you have watched any of my previous videos, I always brag about how amazing this epoxy is. I actually applied this early morning and was able to remove this from my turner, sand it, and apply another layer that afternoon. So the epoxy dries extremely fast. It is so easy to work with, no bubbles. I just love it. So I have sanded my tumbler to get rid of any imperfections or unevenness from those spots, and I'm now going to apply my leopard spots. There's no special way to apply these. I just try to keep them a little random as far as the shape of the spot goes, and try to alternate the directions that they go around the cup. So I don't work in small sections. I just go from, one side of the tumbler to the next, just to sort of alternate around and make sure that it's as, random as possible so it looks more natural. Now I'm just going to speed this up a bit and allow you guys to see where I apply these or how I apply them. And then we'll move along to our next step. Once you have finished applying all the spots, make sure that they are pressed down really nice and go over with another layer of epoxy so it will be smooth. Now I am in Cricut program here. I purchased my file from Etsy. I will link that below, and downloaded it. We are going to add the file to Cricut and select complex so it gets the most detail as possible. The background is already out in this image, so I will just click next, and we are going to do print and cut. And once that shows in our uploaded images, we are just going to select that and pull it over to a new project. Now you will see that I resized this quite a few times. I could not make up my mind what size I did want it on the tumbler. So I wanted it to go a little sideways and wrap a good bit around. I measured with a measuring tape and I just wasn't feeling it. So I went with 7.5 inches, but I definitely wish that I would have went a little bit larger, maybe 8.5. just so it did wrap around just a little bit more. And really, if I had a straight or a plump, then I would have likely just did it probably about an inch to 2 inches larger than the height of the cup. But since the True 22 has a really good taper to it, I was just so indecisive on what size to actually put on there. But once you have the dimensions that you prefer, or the individual flowers that you want to place on the tumbler, you're just going to pull that over to your print and cut screen and select send to printer. And here we want to make sure that our add bleed toggle button is on, so that it extends the boundaries of the colors and gives it a little bit of wiggle room as far as cutting the edges go. And once it comes out of the printer, we are going to place it on our cutting board. Make sure that your edges are lined up perfectly. If not, it can throw the cut off a little bit. But load that into the cutting machine and press your go button when it starts blinking. Now, a trick that I have for this to scan properly, if it's really bright in my room, I will turn the lights off and then I will pull the top cover down on the top of my Cricut. This will help the light that is beside of your blade shine down on the design a little bit better, so you get a better cut. Also, make sure that you have a very sharp blade. You don't have to replace it every time you cut anything out or use this feature. But if it starts fraying your printable vinyl too much, then you definitely need to replace the blade. The printable vinyl that I use will be linked below. It is my favorite because it does cut better than any other that I have used. Now I'm just going to remove the negative space from around my floral cluster. Doing this first will really help get those intricate little flowers on the side. You can pay more attention to detail as if you don't go straight in and just try to pull the flower straight up. These are a little difficult, I'm not gonna lie. So they usually require some cleanup and you have to really take your time when peeling them up from the backing. Now, as I mentioned when we were resizing this image, you can also do individual flowers and just layer them on your cup. That would probably be a little easier than peeling this ginormous cluster of flowers at once, but I guess I like to do things the difficult way. And once I have that off, I'm just going to pick out all the little cuts, almost like a reverse weed, I guess you can say. It's just easier with this printable vinyl to do it before you apply it to the cup rather than after. Now, I had a couple of spots that maybe had some imperfections, like I did get a spot of acrylic somewhere on my cup that I wanted to cover up with this. So I just found that spot and covered it right up. Make sure that you really smooth this out and press out any bubbles from underneath. If those bubbles are underneath whenever you apply your epoxy, you will actually be able to see them. So if you get any, you can go over with a craft knife, just slice a little spot, push the air out, and you will never be able to tell. I found this image for free online and I will link that for you guys below. I created an offset for it in Cricut and I am just going to layer these two. I really wish that the gold vinyl that I'm using had a little bit more orangey tone to it, but in the end it did turn out looking pretty and match the sunflower really well. I'm going to find my center point to apply the decal. You can measure this, but I have done them so many times I just eyeball it. Also, when you're applying a metallic vinyl or a holographic, it is really going to show any detail that is underneath. So you really want to make sure that you are pressing out any air bubbles. And in this, if you do take a craft knife to it, you will definitely be able to see that. So try to press out any of the air bubbles as you are laying down your decal, so it's not going to show any of those imperfections. And again, I sealed with Rust-Oleum matte clear coat. I did that twice to make sure that when I apply my epoxy, I'm not going to get any bleeding from that metallic vinyl. and I'm not going to get any bubbles over top of my printable vinyl. This cup in particular actually did not require any sanding in between the last couple of layers. So I applied this and immediately 3 hours later applied my final coat. I did end up adding a little bit of shimmer from PDB Diamond Dust Mica. I love adding that in my epoxy for final coats on solid tumblers that need a little bit of shimmer to them, or in this case I just felt like the black was a little overwhelming on the spots and I wanted to tone that down just a tiny bit and add a little sparkle. I torched and allowed this to turn for 2.5 to 3 hours with a little extra ink epoxy, and then tilted this up with my really cool turner from MH Turners. I love that you can just unscrew the dial on the side and flip it straight up without having to remove the cup from the turner itself. I will link that below if you guys want to check them out. And here's the final result. To be totally honest, there was a few steps in making this cup, actually just about all of the steps, that I thought, I really don't like it. But I just pushed through the design, recorded the process, and I really love the end result. I hope everyone has enjoyed watching. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'm very active and will answer questions as best as I can. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell to be notified anytime new videos drop. We do have a Facebook group and I absolutely love seeing all of your creations. So definitely check that out and show me all of your designs that you have made from watching my tutorials, or even give me inspiration for my next video. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.